In the history of human race, there have occurred certain events that can be labeled as out of the ordinary and very rare indeed. Such two events, one of them which occurred 2500 years ago and the other 500 after that. 2500 years ago, a prince by the name of Siddhartha Gautama was born in the northeastern part of India, who subsequently, by dint of his very hard efforts and the steps that he took in his life, became Buddha. He was a very transformational personality. In fact, he raised the level of humans to the level of gods. Such an extraordinary event only happens in perhaps millions or billions of years once. And 500 years later, another event happened when another very extraordinary human being was born, and his name was Jesus. We look back at the time when Buddha was born and how the people mentality was prevalent at that time. Now, this lecture that I prepared is the lecture on desires and pleasures. How people viewed their life at that time was totally different from the way the people view their life at this time. At that time, many young men would look at life with a different view. They primarily looked at life with their pursuit towards achieving the spiritual goals. Even Prince Siddhartha Gautama was very much encouraged by his desire to find a solution to the ever occurring and always present suffering beginning from the birth to the end of the life. How to eradicate that suffering. That was his motivation. That was his goal. And that goal led him to become Buddha. He did a lot of research and put himself through untold difficult conditions. And finally, when he achieved that goal, that not only glorified him, but perhaps it glorified the entire humankind. We remember him today because he left us with wonderful teaching that we need to look at. Now, the emphasis of that teaching is about the desires. However, if we look at the teachings fully, and even if we appreciate completely that the prime purpose of life is to end this cycle of suffering by freeing us from this cycle of births and deaths. But is that goal, is that feeling evident in the modern world? No, that feeling is not evident at all. What is evident is that people are engrossed in their mad pursuit towards achievement of worldly goals. Desires are different. While the desires of the young folks at that time, 2500 years ago, was to find the spiritual salvation, today the goal of the young folks and almost everybody is to find the financial salvation. There is a rat race going on in finding huge amounts of wealth, name, fame, power, and that's the goal that almost many people harbor and have set forth to achieve. So, desires are different. So, we are not going to emphasize that spiritual desires of the 25 centuries ago are what people should be doing today, because that will be out of context of the modern day thinking. We should be rather looking at things very objectively as to how best can we do in this present way of thinking, and at the same time, if possible, achieve the same results or close enough to what they had achieved many centuries ago. If we can live the life as taught by the Buddha, we certainly can bring in many elements of that life into our life. We can usher in perpetual happiness while still grappling with a lot of difficulties that have also befallen on us because of our own creations. Creations which have been supplemented by our amazing scientific achievements, which were impossible to even imagine, not to even long distant past. They have also brought a lot of difficulties. We need not go into many details enunciating those difficulties. We all understand them. We are going through them. Today, we know that the man has landed even on the moon. The engineering crafts are combing the surface of Mars. So we have ascended to limits unthinkable ever before. So we must endorse this fact that every achievement begins with a desire. Even my this effort to communicate on this subject has begun with my desire to do so. Desire, therefore, is a must prior to the start of any project. It is in fact key to motivation to continue by putting in determined and unrelenting efforts to achieve the success of the project. Strong desire only can surmount the arduous journey towards the goal. Life would be really meaningless and dull, and perhaps worthless if there were no desires. Desires and dreams are the same. Everything that we see and use to our advantage is because someone imagined and desired for it, dreamt about it, and put in the best efforts to make it a reality. Thus, we became the beneficiaries of those great desires and dreams. So, it is definitely important and essential to have desires and dreams in life. Desires pave the way to high goals, whether they are spiritual, material, or worldly. This subject has to be understood in a proper context. This is so because we read or hear from our religious scriptures and we are told that the highest goal of life is attaining salvation, that is nirvana. And that is possible only if we detach ourselves from the allures of the world. That's exactly was the case when Siddhartha Gautama roamed over this planet. Today is different. Obviously, we would say that there are two types of desires. One type is worldly desires, which make us seek best of our comfortable life with all facilities and pleasures. The other is spiritual desires, which make us relinquish all the efforts and the search for worldly pleasures and lead a life that is devoted to attaining salvation or nirvana. These are two different types of desires, and they are contradictory to each other. You may not have both at the same time. In our time, which one is the least chosen path? Of course, we know that. Whether to seek most comfortable life or seek salvation while spending the life in deprivation. Clearly, it is the former. Everyone is striving to seek high standards of living. This generates a lot of competition and discord. The level of stress is higher and feelings run strong in jealousy, hatred, anger, and so on. Scriptures consider such feelings as defilements of the mind. They do not condone the increase in intensity of these defilements because they are considered as the prime reasons for our suffering. The reality of life today does clearly show us that we lead a fast, stressful, and disturbed life. And the fact also remains that although all of us are in that rat race of acquiring wealth, name, and fame, not all of us succeed. Thus, the stresses are experienced on both sides, either success or failure to achieve what we are set out to achieve. It is therefore fair to say that suffering accompanies our desires for better life. We experience stresses in our life due to our successes as well as failures. We can conclude that all worldly desires have inevitably suffering attached to them. So what does that mean? Should we abandon worldly desires and embrace spiritual desires only, as it used to be the case many centuries ago? If we think wisely, we can find the answer. We should encourage such desires in our mind and pursue them fully, which bring us benefit, bring benefits to others around us, do not hurt us, or do not hurt others as well. We should never lose sight of the fact that every pleasure that gives us happiness has some drawbacks to it. There is not a single pleasure in the world that is totally problem free. Think about it. Here we are reminded by Buddha, who said, "Pleasure is a bond, a joy that is brief, of little taste, leading to a drawn out pain. The wise know that the hook is baited." No one is asking to not have pleasures at all, but one should not get addicted to them. We should keep everything in moderation. Excess brings headaches and problems, so avoid it. It is necessary to realize that each and every desire that arises in mind does not have to be satisfied. One should train oneself to analyze what is absolutely necessary and meets the criteria, as we said before. Remember that if we embark on satisfying all the desires that are born in our mind, we will be like simply filling or trying to fill a bottomless pot. They will arise endlessly, one after another, and our life will get spent in that wild goose chase. In conclusion, I will urge that there is a need to develop a right understanding about our desires. There are good desires and there are bad desires. There are constructive desires and there are destructive desires. And of course, there are desires that are superfluous. It is good to have good desires, constructive desires. As is said in the Hindu Upanishads, you are what your deep driving desire is. As your desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny. You may have desires for reaching out to stars. Concentrate on such desires and give your best to achieve them. But guard against the bad desires and don't let all the desires get out of control. For worldly desires, there should be limit, and this limit should be governed by the limit of your financial resources. Always cut your coat according to your cloth, as goes the saying. For spiritual goals, you will have to consider relinquishing all the desires, including the worldly ones. It should be you who should decide which goal is for you and when is the right time to start pursuing it. We hope that you will consider all the foregoing points in carving out a better way of life for you for now and in future. Thank you.